Hello, and welcome to the Smith and Savage podcast. Here, I sit down with fellow makers, artists, and adventurers, people passionate about living their best life. Good people, good conversation. I'm your host, Levi Pollard. Let's get into it. This episode is sponsored by Going to the Sun Gallery. Nestled in the heart of downtown Whitefish, Montana, Going to the Sun Gallery is a place where the spirit of the American West comes alive. They showcase original artwork from local and national artists and offer a wide selection of Montana sapphires, gold jewelry, and Native American-made turquoise jewelry. Shipping is available to wherever you're listening. Visit them online at goingtothesungallery.com, where you can even find a bronze sculpture from yours truly. My guest today is Mark Danger Powers. Yes, that's his real middle name. I've seen the driver's license. Mark is a professional percussionist, educator, author, world traveler, and a fellow Renaissance soul. He's recorded and performed with an incredible range of artists and has taught in schools and programs around the world. Mark has built his life around craft, creativity, and making things with intention. This conversation is a deep dive into the art of drumming and the lessons learned from a musical life. I hope you enjoy it. Here we go.
Nice, man. It's good to get to catch up with you again.
Yeah, you as well. So you're you're not exactly in Portland, or are you?
I am just outside of Portland in Tigard.
And how long now you've been there?
We bought the house here in Tigard. We closed on January 15, 2020. So it was right before the pandemic started, which was the absolute worst and best time for me to get into the house, because kind of worse because we take on a mortgage and suddenly all of my income stops. But also best because we actually had purchased more house than the two of us needed, knowing that we needed an art studio and a drum studio. So I ended up having the space to build out a room that now I use all the time. I'm working in there, either teaching remote lessons or even making remote school visits, and constantly recording remote drum tracks and things. So it was kind of a blessing in disguise, really.
Kind of a launch pad then to be able to have the time even to do that.
Exactly.
To do the build out and stuff.
Yep. Yeah, that's very true. It's one of those things that we had allotted the space for, but in all reality, if it hadn't been for the pandemic, who knows if I ever would even be done with the drum studio now,
right?
Because life just gets away from you and you're busy. And
right.
But yeah, it did allow the time and the necessity to just make it happen.
Yeah, that's great. Well, man, thanks so much for saying yes to this.
Absolutely, man. Like when you mentioned this, I love the whole idea of what you've got going on and just you in general. So when you brought up the idea, I really didn't need to click links and check it out. I was like, yes, I want to do this with Levi. Absolutely.
I appreciate that. Yeah. And I feel the same way about you, wanting to have you on as a guest. I was like, Mark is the perfect person to talk to about this. I mean, you're a professional artist and you also are a deep thinker. I like your style, dude.
Same, man. Ditto.
Okay, so getting into it, you want to tell people some of your background, what you've been up to lately, and how you got started, kind of your origin story?
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I normally tell people I do is playing drums, but really it's so much more than that. And I got into playing initially in 5th grade after doing the little instrument petting zoo thing at school years ago, and was kind of torn between trumpet and drums and ended up going the drums route. And it wasn't until many years later that I got a little bit more serious about it and started getting into drum set rather than just all of the concert band percussion that you play, and saw my older brother quit his other quote unquote jobs to play piano and organ and teach voice lessons full time, and realized that music was potentially an option. And then a few years after that, I actually got a little bit more serious about drum set in general and got out of high school a couple of years early and went to a little school in Minneapolis to study. And yeah, that's kind of that in a nutshell. I've been really playing ever since and trying to constantly learn, but then have just veered off in all sorts of creative directions. I just love learning and tackling different challenges. So do a little bit of acting, a little bit of writing, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And so, yeah, I typically default to saying I'm a drummer, but largely just because it's too much to say all of that. But
Yeah. Yeah.
that's kind of go a bunch of different directions.
Yeah. That's why I usually ask that. Okay, first off, for myself, I hate that question when people ask me, so what do you do? Similarly, there's a brief answer, and then there's a like, but if you're interested in what I actually am interested in, there's several other things to talk about.
I find that I almost treat it like a game for myself as quickly as possible, see how fast I can turn it back on, so it's like, oh, what do you do? And I'm like, I played drums in a variety of different capacities. Like, what do you do? And I feel if we end up connecting online and they see whether it's socials or my site or something and they care, they'll find out about other stuff that I do. And if not, I don't need to talk about it.
Yeah, for me, it tends to be what I'm focusing on at that specific time, which changes day to day when depending on when someone asks me. But yeah, it was funny. I was in Vegas with a buddy 2 weeks ago, and the blackjack dealer said, "So what do you do?" And I was just like, and it was a long pause, and I was like, "I'm not really sure." And she's like, "You don't know what you do?" I was like, well, I'm not sure what to tell you right now. Always interested in a lot of different things.
I think that's even a better answer there because it just solidifies you in that dealer's mind as the international man of mystery.
Right.
It's just great. It's like, what does this guy do?
Yeah. So can you go back to the beginning? You mentioned about your older brother and what some of the stuff that you saw there from him. What's the age gap like there?
My brother is 12 years older than me. Yeah, I remember growing up as a kid sitting in church with him playing piano and organ and accompanying choirs and things like that. So that was just kind of something he did. I never really thought about it as a vocation of any sort. But like I said, as I got a little bit older, I was in high school and we'd grown up in small communities. And I remember he was working probably a couple of jobs, doing something, managing at a local grocery store or something. And I remember that moment in time when he quit doing those things to just teach and accompany and perform on a regular basis. And although that didn't click in my brain as like, wow, he did that, I can do it. It was just this realization that, oh, that can kind of be a career, a job, and that further developed in my brain later on. And what we do musically is extremely far removed. They're very different types of things that we've done over the years and very rarely have gotten to make music together. Actually, this year, he's celebrating his 30th year directing a community choir back in Washburn, Wisconsin. And we actually get to make music together in that capacity, or at least I get to perform in his group that he's directing for maybe the second time in 30 years. And so that's a lot of fun getting to collaborate with him because our worlds are so different. They've just really not crossed too much.
Yeah. So you've been drumming steadily since 5th grade?
Yeah. It's just changed. Like I said, when I started there, it was the concert band stuff. So you're playing bass drum and snare drum and cowbell and timpani and whatever, and went to a couple of different schools. And it seemed like there was always someone who either was already kind of there in the preferred pick for drum set stuff or was just playing better than me. And that wasn't something that I really got to do in school, even as my interests started going further that direction. But eventually, I don't know, 14 years old, I think I started playing with a couple of buddies. I got invited over to a shed to do a little garage band jam and hauled my rickety little drum set into a shed with somebody with an electric guitar and a bass and probably banged out like a couple of Metallica songs and maybe some old Nirvana or something. And I just remember that being pretty earth shattering. It's like, whoa, playing with a couple of peers playing rock music. This is great.
Mm.
So yeah, then things just kind of went from there. And when I started studying at a little music college in Minneapolis, which is no more, but at the time it was called Music Tech and later became McNally Smith College of Music in St. Paul, I just worked with a lot of really phenomenal instructors there. And one of them who's been a lifelong friend and mentor and just kind of co-collaborator ever since. David Stanek, he was somebody that I took classes from, but I also took a lot of private lessons from. And he just really forced me down rabbit holes that I probably wouldn't have gone on my own accord. I came in thinking that I was going to prepare to be the replacement for Lars Ulrich whenever Metallica needed a new drummer someday. I had the long hair and, I was just ready to rock. And I remember him saying, yeah, you were in that rock ensemble last term. You should do the pop ensemble next time. And I'm like, oh man, playing pop songs. And, at the time, the idea of like working with a female singer seemed foreign to me. I was like, what? Like, this is not my wheelhouse at all. And got into the pop ensemble, and that spread my wings in that area. Worked with Lori Kivel, who happened to be the singer in there, who to this day is a friend of mine, and she's a great singer over in the Twin Cities. Then next term, he said, oh, you should be in this jazz ensemble. And I did that, and the jazz ensemble was horrible. All of us were rockers who, really didn't want to be doing it, but were probably being forced to. I mean, we had the wrong instruments, it was like Jackson electric guitars, but suffered through a little bit of that. And then he was like, oh, you should be in this, quote unquote Latin ensemble. And that ensemble changed it for me, because I got in there and suddenly you're playing like wawankos and songos and cha-chas and these different styles that were, literally and figuratively foreign to me. And for the first time ever, I eventually, with work, started playing things that not only were impressive to other people, because not everybody could play them, just kind of a basic rock beat or something, but also just those were the first things that really made me just have these moments of excitement when I would accomplish some crazy coordination challenge or something. You suddenly start sounding like 2 or 3 players at the same time, and you're playing styles that were never meant to be played by drum set originally. Typically, they're played by multiple percussionists in an ensemble, and you're very poorly replicating all of those at the same time, omitting some things, but layering bell patterns with parts ripped from conga patterns and things like that. And as I would get some of that stuff going, it was just mind-opening for me. And I'm just like, that is so cool.
Yeah.
And so that just really made me suddenly decide that I was never going to turn my nose up at a style of music again, because I started finding there's depth to everything. It doesn't matter if you're playing a polka gig, which I did a ton of when I was in the Midwest, or a country gig or anything. Like, there's depth there that if you really get into, will also uncover challenges for you as a player and make you grow.
Yeah, that's great to be exploring other styles that might not resonate with you initially, but how that makes you a better, more well-rounded player as a whole. And then when you come back to a style that is more your own, it sounds like that improved your skill set there quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, that's something I preach to students all the time these days. I mean, I don't care what style of music you think or say that you want to play. I mean, that's like all fine and dandy. It's your prerogative to have preferences and things. But as an educator, I feel it's my job to push you down some of these alleyways that you might not go on your own for exactly that reason. Like you said, I mean, you come back to the rock gig that you're playing or something, and you bring some fresh ideas that aren't like every other rock drummer you've heard. And it's the sort of thing that either makes someone feel that what you just played is insanely creative, even though you kind of stole it from some other rhythm, or it's the sort of thing that, gets those sorts of remarks after playing a set where somebody's like, you don't just play rock, do you? Like, somebody can see there's an element of something else. And you can bring those things in when you choose to. I'm always talking to my students about like having as many options at your disposal as possible, having lots of tools in your toolbox. And then you can choose when you're going to bastardize and mash things together, but you can also choose when you're going to not do that, and you're just going to sound 100% like the quintessential rock drummer, or you're going to sound 100% like you're playing bebop right now, or whatever it is. And I think that is more and more possible the more you explore different things. You start understanding the vocabulary that accompany these different styles.
I don't play an instrument myself. Similarly, it was fifth grade as well with the music petting zoo. And I picked up clarinet for 2 seasons and not anymore, but yeah, so I don't currently play anything, but I've heard that learning an instrument is similar to learning another language, that it's exercise for your brain that's kind of activating a different part, and you can bring that to the rest of your life. I'm curious how you view that.
I view that completely the same way. I mean, something, again, I'm sure way too many times in our conversation here, I'll bring up my students and, the fact that a lot of these ideas are things I'm kind of preaching to them all the time. But that similarity between a spoken language that you're learning and a musical language that you're learning is something that comes up constantly for me with students, because very similarly, I think you learn syntax. You learn how to start putting these small pieces together in different orders that create different results. And you have to learn how to sound. I mean, hitting a snare drum is not just hitting a snare drum. You can hit that. 20 people can hit that same stroke on the snare drum and sound 20 different ways, because we each have kind of our own accent, like you would speaking a language. And when you're going deep into a particular style, oftentimes you have to look at not only the rhythms that are played in that genre, but the types of instruments that those rhythms are played on, and then how you attack the instrument in order to get the type of sound. I mean, you can, get a rim shot on a snare drum where you're hitting the center of the head and the rim at the same time. So you're making contact with the tip of the stick and the middle of the stick, but hitting that exact same thing and gradually pulling the stick outward towards the edge of the drum, you can get that same rim shot to sound 100 different ways.
Yeah.
And that sound is going to be such a huge part of what you create. There's the rhythm that's being played, yes, but then there's the dynamics and the actual quality of the sound you're making, learning how to tune your instrument to get the sounds you're wanting to hear. And then you're really, kind of mentioned this earlier, you're learning this vocabulary that is associated with any given style. And again, I'm not always using that vocabulary. Sometimes I'm making the decision to take something out of context, and I might take a Cuban cascara rhythm like this, and I might split that rhythm, some of the notes, into 2 parts, and behind a drum set rock groove that I record for somebody, I might make that cascara rhythm be actually split between 2 different wine bottles that I've recorded that I fade way in the background, and nobody really notices that they're wine bottles, or, that it's cascara. Virtually no one is going to listen to it and go, wow, that's a cascara rhythm he's playing. It's like, no, it's just this little sonic thing in the background. I send the tracks off and the client is like, whoa, that's so cool. Like, I don't know what you have going on there, but that loop thing that you made is awesome. And I know that I just made an informed decision based on the song that I'm working on creating a part for, matched with this library or encyclopedia of rhythms and things that I have, and then making sonic choices that fit that given situation, so that I'm I always want this huge encyclopedia of information, but I want to use that information musically. I don't to be forcing something just to be like, isn't that impressive? I was sneaking that thing in. So yeah, I mean, it's literally a language. If I want my students to be able to sit down and play a Brazilian bossa nova and play some, fill phrases that are typical of that genre. And then when they turn around and they play Cuban rumba, they can play some fills that are typical of that genre, only breaking those, quote unquote rules if they choose to. Again, you can always make the decision to, but I want them to be able to play authentically if they want. And that is not at all unlike learning how to speak a foreign language. And again, syntax, how you put the words that you learn into different orders and speak in that language, because we all know we very well might put adjectives before a noun, and then you're suddenly going to learn
Yeah.
some foreign language that has the adjectives after the noun, and they're changing, based on the gender of the noun, and you're like, what? These
Yeah.
are like concepts that I already know, but they're in different orders, and I'm doing things with them that I haven't normally done, and that's music is like that all the time.
Yeah, that's so great. Getting an experience like that, I can totally understand how that opens your mind to thinking about it a different way.
Yeah.
And that kind of reminds me of like thinking of sometimes I like to I'll read books by people that I know I know before I even start that I don't agree with their opinion.
Well, yeah.
And not all the time because it's challenging to do, but it's nice to exercise a different part of the brain and kind of just have a different understanding, a different viewpoint, how to look at things. And also, it's good to question my own biases too. It's good to get another perspective.
Yeah.
You've done quite a bit of traveling as well then. Yeah.
Yeah. I have said for years that music is my passport. I mean, I feel extremely fortunate that in various musical ways, whether it's performing or studying or recording, that I've kind of gotten all over the globe doing that. And anytime I do get anywhere, I'm always trying to find something about local traditional music from that area, again, because I always want to learn. I always want to, steal some rhythms or maybe pick up some percussion instrument I've never run across before. And all of that just feeds the other stuff that I do. Music has been the thing that has allowed me to just explore everywhere. I mean, whether I'm performing, studying, getting to record, it's really, I feel fortunate that I've gotten to not only see a lot of places on the planet, but also gotten to make music with people in those places, which to me is even better. I mean, I love travel. I don't always make the best vacationer because I'm such a project oriented person,
Yeah.
but I love being in new places, meeting new people, trying different foods, being around languages that I don't understand. And along with that comes just new musics. So anytime I can gather new rhythms or even acquire new instruments from a part of the world I've never been to, like it's awesome.
Yeah, I'd like to come back to that in a minute. I'll ask you something else here first, but about you had done quite a bit of African drumming, and I think you were into that at the time that we met years back.
Yeah, you and I had met in Salem.
Mm-hmm.
And around that time, I had made a trip to Uganda to record an album of youth choirs in villages outside the capital of Kampala. And I released a project called Amalabozi, and it consisted of all these youth choirs and some musicians at International School in town, as well as John Z Band, a local group. And it all went to benefit an organization called Show Mercy that does work with kids over there. And that was my second African adventure. Several years prior, I had spent 3.5 months living in the village of Kopaia in Ghana, Southeast Ghana, studying percussion. So I was really studying various styles of the Ewe people over there. And that's something that still to this day, I end up going into schools and teaching about quite a bit. And those ideas, the instruments themselves, and certainly just the rhythms definitely get worked into other things that I perform as well.
How did that come about? How did that start that you wanted to explore that?
This goes back to what we were talking about earlier about just the musical path as I was initially forced into different genres. And like I said, I reached this point where I was definitely more open and interested in all sorts of styles. And then I had an experience where another instructor at Music Tech, Paul Stuber, had passed a gig on to me that he had been called for, and it was a conga gig for this like Aveda Institute runway modeling show. Like it was just kind of absurd, but I didn't know anything about the instrument. I picked up a book on conga drumming and like shed it all weekend to try to pull something off for this little show, which I guarantee was absolutely horrid. But I got through it, and around that time, I think because of my interest in other styles, I just started becoming more interested in the roots of the musics, the popular styles of music that I had always been playing. So, whether you're talking rock, R&B, hip hop, funk, all of these things, jazz, like where did all that stuff come from? And West Africa and the diaspora from there to the Americas, just along with the European influences that they all kind of were mashed into, created a good majority of these popular music styles that myself and many of us have spent most of our lives playing and listening to. And I just really wanted to get as close to the roots of some of that as I could, completely understanding, being aware of and respecting the fact that even in Ghana, things have evolved. So what we think of as traditional music there isn't the same as what traditional music there would have been 100 years ago or something, much less, further than that. But it was just an interest because I wanted to get as close to those roots as possible and play some genres that had influenced the things that I was playing. As luck would have it, Dane Richardson, phenomenal percussionist, one of my favorite percussionists on the planet. He was teaching at the Lawrence University in Appleton, Wisconsin, and he had studied in Ghana and Cuba and various parts of the world. And I reached out to him, and he gave me a contact over there. Where I was going had no running water, no electricity. So I had an email address. I could email this guy, Emmanuel, and every couple of weeks he'd cross the border into Lomé, the capital of Togo, and check email and respond to me. And then by the time I got back to him, I wouldn't hear from him again for another couple of weeks. But over months and months and months, I was able to work it out to come over to a little school that he had, the Dagbe Cultural Center, and do some studying. So
Wow.
I took off in 2003 and spent time over there studying with his crew. And yeah, I came back not only ready to take those ideas and the things I learned into schools to share with them, in a larger capacity with other people, but also really just came back unexpectedly, I guess, came back just playing very, very differently because I'd been away from a drum set, hadn't touched a drum set in that stretch of time. I'd been playing very different styles, very aggressively and just with a lot of intent. And that very quickly influenced the playing that I was doing when I came back home for the better. And yeah, that again, not only kind of made me more interested in learning about more world music styles, more traditional styles, but also was the experience that made the travel bug bite. At that point in time, my family had never really traveled. So I made that trip thinking that I was going on my life's one big adventure. Got to throw everything at this because it's the one time I'm going to get away. And about a week and a half into that trip, I remember journaling. I was up at night. My little lantern that this woman, Rose, would fill with oil so I could stay up at night and do some journaling and transcribing my notes from the day. But I remember journaling about a week and a half in that, like, I've got to do a lot more of this. And there was a stretch of time beginning then for a few years where I don't think I ever came home from a trip without already knowing in my mind, like, when and where I was going next.
Oh, uh-huh.
But it was great.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. I'm not sure timeline-wise. I think it would have been after that. But if you remember the camping trip we went out to, Three Pools, you and I had met prior to that. I didn't know that you would be there. Andrew Hussey and you sort of did an impromptu jam session around the fire. And yeah, it was unforgettable. Like the best ever campfire music between the two of you. I think you hadn't played together before, but you had brought some of your drums, and it was very much like, I think lots of people have been around a campfire and somebody brings out a bongo or something like that and plays. And this was very different from that. I felt fortunate to be front row and to be listening to you guys playing together and just riffing off of each other. And it was, yeah, it was amazing. I was like, this is just a different experience where it felt like, I remember being like, that's a very similar drum to others that I've seen. I don't know how he's making all those different sounds.
I do remember that camp trip, and I think you're right. I think that might have been the first time that Andrew and I met, and then later I played drum set with his band a few times. But yeah, I think I had a couple of djembes that I had brought back from West Africa at that hang. And again, I mean, you mentioned it being different than other drum circle type, jam things, whatever that you've experienced. I think that the drum circle sort of experience has a lot of inherent value. I think that the experience of having people from different walks of lives, different backgrounds, different careers, all conjoining in one spot, and regardless of what their experience level is, percussion wise or just musically whatsoever, they grab some drums. There's an element of instant gratification when you hit your hand in the middle of a djembe and you hear a bass tone.
Mm-hmm.
And these people can all get together and create some rhythm together. And I think there's a lot of community wellness that can take place in a situation like that. And I think it's phenomenal. It's great. As an educator with my own personal interests going into all of these styles, and like I said, trying to educate my students and building vocabulary in these different languages, I've always leaned towards teaching quote unquote more correct patterns and at least legit, like these are the rhythms that would typically be played in these styles. Here are some variations we could play. And around that same time that we had met, I was directing an adult hand drum ensemble, our class that then turned into an ensemble in the Salem area. And we, on a weekly basis, would go down different rabbit holes, and we were playing, Puerto Rican bomba rhythms and some Malian or Guinean djembe rhythms, and we were playing some Cuban rhythms, and we really made a point of separating those, sometimes playing different instruments on those different styles as well. But every once in a while, we would go down to the drum circle that would take place down at Riverfront Park on Wednesdays, I believe it was. And every once in a while, we would all plan to get together to go down there. And I really tried to make a point every time of explaining to them, which I did not think to do the first time. The experience prompted me to make sure to do that in the future, to explain to them that our jobs were not to go down and play legit styles with everybody down there. Again, you can take elements of these, infuse in things, but don't turn to the person jamming next to you and tell them they're playing a part wrong. Like, that's not what the drum circle's about. Like,
sure. Yeah.
We're going down there to have some fun. If you want to, without telling anyone what you're doing, integrate some of these rhythms that again, if you're making what you feel is a smart musical choice with that, then by all means do it, go for it, but our MO is not to go down and somehow commandeer this group and like take over and show off. That's music can be so many things. And in that particular situation, that's not what we're supposed to do musically. At least I feel. Given opportunities, I'm totally going to educate and want to do that. But there are times you don't. And similarly, I tell students, I want you to learn these things. I want you to know the difference between a rumba and a rumba. If you're playing drum set, I don't normally like using the term. I call it the L word in my studio, Latin, because we here tend to clump all of these North American styles into this Latin category. So it's like, that means Brazilian rhythms, Cuban rhythms, sometimes even some European things that really are even further removed. And I don't want my students to consider themselves purveyors of Latin rhythms. Instead, I want them to be aware of Cuban rhythms and Brazilian rhythms. And again, it goes back to the vocabulary and respecting those genres and all the players and the history. And so if you're on stage and somebody turns around to you and they're like, guitar player looks at it and goes like, follow me, this is a rumba. And they start playing a little guitar part, and you can tell that like a Brazilian bossa nova would fit better. It is not the time and place to stop them and educate them on what they're doing. It's like, you just be a pro and do what you do. And like, you're aware of it, and that's all that really matters.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, can you give me kind of a day in the life of how much are you teaching right now versus playing gigs versus recording? How's that look for you?
Yeah, that, similar to how you mentioned earlier that sometimes the way you define what you're doing is just kind of based sometimes around what you happen to be neck deep in at the time. Things are just constantly changing for me. I mean, I teach private lessons remotely, so they're online. And when I returned to Oregon several years ago, I promised myself that I would not do that more than 2 days a week to keep time open for other things. So Mondays and Tuesdays in the evenings, I teach private lessons remotely. And a lot of the week is made up of some of my other creative work, which kind of changes a little bit day to day. And then, of course, rehearsals and gigs, performing top of this year here, performing quite a lot, which is great, with just a lot of different people. And then I do a ton of recording. So I'll do on location recording sessions at studios all over the Portland area. But I these days probably do 50% or more of my recording right from home in my own, I call it Aviarium Studios. And it's great because it just really expands the number of people I can work with. It doesn't have to be local. I can record a track for somebody in San Francisco and turn around and record a track for somebody in Scotland. And those were actually literally my first two recordings that ever came out of the studio was for a guy in San Francisco and then a guy in Scotland. And I'm like, wow, okay, this is why I put this together. This is great.
Yeah, that's great. So, and practice now for you, what does that look like? And how do you have I mean, as I said, my music training is very, very, very basic, but I know you have to practice quite a bit. And you're also, as a teacher and instructor, you must have some tips there. And how do you keep your motivation up for that?
Yeah, for me, I think first and foremost, as busy as I am performing, practice has to happen on a regular basis just for the performances that are upcoming. And so the time that I spend in the practice room for myself varies a bit and is split between what I would consider just skill development, which can consist of just technique, working on stickings and speed and control on things. It can also be working on a genre, like a style of music that I haven't, well, I was going to say mastered, but I haven't mastered any of them. So I will always be working on virtually anything I can get my hands on. But sometimes going, down a direction that I haven't, or that I'm just curious about, or that I feel I have a weakness in. I could be sitting in there just working with a little right foot bass drum exercise for a while because I feel like my right foot control has been kind of sloppy. And then that is somewhat balanced, or not balanced, but maybe teeter-tottering back and forth some with practice that is more just geared toward specific gig stuff that I need. And that can be just making sure I'm sitting down and running tunes for the upcoming show to make sure everything is kind of in my head so that when I'm on stage, I'm not looking at my notes so much and can just really be playing music and be more right brained on stage than left brain. And it can also be just shedding particular licks. That just happened to me recently. I was filling in for somebody, and a phenomenal drummer in the area, who's a friend of mine, recorded on the band's album. And one little section of a tune had a little bit of a drum feature. There was literally one bar of music that I listened to, and it was this crazy, monstrous 16th note triplet drum fill happening. And when I listened to it on my first listen, I was like, crap, I'm going to have to spend some time on that one. And it's just like, I could have played a fill that's just in my own wheelhouse in that spot. And in some situations, I might choose to do that. But in this particular instance, I listened to it. I'm like, man, if I were a listener live and I was familiar with this recording and I didn't hear the drummer somewhat replicate that sort of the vibe of that fill, I'd be a little bummed, so I'm like, I've got to put that on myself to try to come close to this. And just the way he phrased it, it's just not the way I would normally do it. So, again, I think it's kind of like learning that style of music that you don't think you have interest in, or as you mentioned, like reading that book from somebody who might have a totally different viewpoint than you. Sometimes something like that pops up and I'm like, crap, I'm going to have to just woodshed this for a while. So yeah, I spent a little time, many days in a row, with a metronome set far slower than my intended target tempo, just working this lick out after I had kind of transcribed it to the best of my ability. My goal, and what I ultimately did before the show, was to work it up to probably 10 beats per minute faster than he had done it, because I don't want to be on the gig and be playing something like that at the cusp of my ability level.
Yeah.
I want to be so comfortable with that. I know I can go even faster with it, that then when I drop 10 BPM for the gig, I'm like, I got this. It's now in my bag of tricks.
That's great. I love that.
My practice kind of goes back and forth between things like that a little bit.
Okay, a quick pause because this conversation with Mark is really about craft, learning, and what it takes to build mastery over time. So I wanted to mention Masterclass. And just to be clear, they're not a sponsor of this show yet, but it's just something that I actually use and enjoy and have personally recommended it to friends. So now I'm recommending it to you. What I love about Masterclass is that you're learning directly from real professionals. People who've spent decades at the top of their field. I mean, where else do you get to sit down with Steve Martin, Timbaland, Natalie Portman, Sam Jackson, and Marty Scorsese and actually learn their process for making their best work? For those of us committed to a lifetime of learning, this is such a great resource. So I recommend you check out Masterclass. All right, back to the conversation. And how do you get yourself to do something you don't want to do?
I get to do things you don't want to do. Yeah, I think I'm still working on this. I think most of us are. I think that for me, though, it is a matter of like evaluating the value or importance of different things that you need to do. So even like tasks that are on your to-do list or something. And sometimes I think about the Derek Sivers quote, which I'm probably butchering, but it's something along the lines of like, it's either hell yes or no.
Right.
You know, like sometimes there are things that I don't want to do, and I've been battling trying to get myself to do it, and I'll reach a point where I'm like, you know what? Like, why am I doing this? Like, I really don't want to do this. I don't have interest in this. Maybe I feel for some weird reason like I'm supposed to. And I think I've learned that it's okay to say no to some of those things. It's okay to not reply to every single message. There are some that all of us get that actually would probably be good for our own mental health and other reasons to just drop and, not respond. And it's okay to abandon a book. That's something that I used to be so bad at. I would suffer through the last, 75% of a book because I was like, I started this, I'm going to read it. And finally I
Same.
realized like, screw that. Like I could be reading something of more value to me that either I enjoy or I can actually take something out of. And if it is something, kind of tying this back into practicing specifically, I mean, if it is something that I need to do, I I try to just eat the frog,
Mm-hmm.
like as quickly as possible. And I have a mantra fairly recently that I've been trying to literally reiterate to myself out loud several times a day. And it sounds cheesy and woo woo and dumb, but it's really this like three-parter that is what needs to be done. I do it now, and incredible things are happening for me today. And to me, there are many, many, many aspects to that. So, first of all, there's just that like awareness and statement of, that determination to figure out what does need to be done. And that can be for your career or for this gig that's coming up or whatever. Let's be an adult here. And what do I freaking have to do? Like what really needs to be done. And then the second part, like I do it now, it's for me is that the first word, I'm really putting it on myself. I'm responsible. And we're never really capable of controlling the outcome of things, but we can control what we're doing. We can control our response to things, but we can control the process, even if we can't control what the future product of that will be. But it's like I'm committing to doing something myself, to actually putting in work. And then there's also just the urgency of it, the fact that I say now, and sometimes that makes me go, crap, I got to go sit down and write that ugly email that I don't want to write right now, but I'm the person who has to do it. And if I put it off, I'm going to feel like this again tomorrow. So let me just do it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the incredible things are happening for me today. Again, I think it's that abundance mindset rather than scarcity and expecting positive. I try more and more these days to not expect negative. I feel like I'm not surrounded by, but I feel like I have people in my life who expect the negative to happen. It's something that I just really try not to do. It's like I try not to be like kid myself and just be like, everything's gonna be great. Life is
Hmm.
beautiful. Like, shit's crazy right now. But I do think if you're taking responsibility and you're taking action, incredible things are going to happen, and it's like not every time, but they are. And then the last part about that is being that they're happening for me today. I mean, again, there's that immediacy of it, but I think for me rather than to me is a really important thing because good or bad, I've really tried to become more aware that things don't just simply happen to me, especially those things that seem like they're bad, but they happen for me. Like, even if I didn't get the outcome I want, even if something unexpected and crappy happens, it's happening for me for some reason. And that I think puts you in a position to reflect, meditate, and learn. So, like I said, as so many times people hear like that sort of like mantra, and it's just like, oh, that's, great, positive, rah, rah, self talk. But to me, there's a lot to it. And it is literally something I will say out loud to myself a couple times a day when I'm remembering to.
That's great.
And so that applies to life and business, but it also a lot applies to what I should be doing in the practice room to get ready for gigs coming up.
Yeah, I'm big on exploring self talk and mantras and how much those things we say to ourselves are either empowering us or disempowering us. That words, our own words, have power. And also how, that a lot of life is a self fulfilling prophecy.
Mm.
And your expectations actually do inform all of these micro decisions that you make along the way and do influence the outcome of things.
100%.
Yeah. So speaking of when things don't go your way or the way you were hoping, which by the way, that's another of, I have caught myself a lot of times telling myself, well, don't get your hopes up about something or not quite expecting a negative outcome. But yeah, I've changed that for myself in recent times of like, actually, I want to be hopeful. Like,
Yeah.
why not? It might not be the outcome that I'm hoping for, but I find that I'm still better off hoping all the way through. And then if it doesn't quite work out the way I want, you're not really saving yourself from anything by not having hope. You're just making it worse all the way
Yeah.
throughout.
Yeah, you couldn't be more right. I mean, my wife and I were just talking about that recently, how that idea that we worry about things, we have concern for things,
Mm-hmm.
all of us have things that are coming up and, you want good outcomes or you're worried how this interaction is going to take place. But the more that you're worrying about it in advance, not only does not change whatever that outcome is, but it also, like you suggested there, just keeps you in this negative, worried state all the way up to that point.
Mm-hmm.
So either you're worried for the next 2 weeks leading up to this, and then it ends up really crappy and there's even more of that, or you're worried about it for the next 2 weeks and then everything turns out great. And you're like, you just made yourself suffer for 2 weeks over this thing and stress. And it's like, that's not good for us physically, mentally, anything. It's like, we're going to have some negativity. We're going to have, some crap happen, but like, why add to that?
Right. Yep, exactly. And so along that line, do you have any kind of favorite failures of your own
Oh, wow.
where something didn't turn out the way you thought and then later turn out to be a good thing or
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, God, I've had tons of failures. No, actually, to be completely honest, a big one for me is a relationship.
mm-hmm.
And, most of us have been in and out of a number of relationships. And sometimes, a relationship ends and it can be a horrible thing. Sometimes a relationship ends and it's a great thing. And sometimes just the circumstances of a relationship get you into a place that you otherwise wouldn't have gotten yourself into. And that leads to things and opens the doors to other things. And for me, that was the case with the relationship that I moved to the state of Oregon in initially in 2006, the first time I moved to Oregon, because yeah, I mean, I was really loving this area after touring out here with the band, went back home. The girl I was seeing wanted nothing to do with staying in the Midwest. She was from the East Coast. And so at the mere mention of me saying, oh man, like Oregon could be cool, she's like, yes, let's go. Let's get out of here. And I found some work teaching at a music store in Salem. And we zipped out here, and it didn't take very long for that relationship to fall apart in horrendous ways. But I was in Oregon now. And, would I have made this move on my own? I don't know. Maybe I would have, but I kind of feel like where I was at that point in my life, I probably wouldn't have. So it was a catalyst that helped make this interest that I had actually come to fruition, and ended up out here. And man, I mean, I can't imagine that things could have turned out better had I not ventured out this way. I mean, I've had so many opportunities. I love the West Coast, Pacific Northwest in general. Portland's a great place to be based out of, easy to, travel in and out of. And just the culture that I'm surrounded by here fits me so much better than the culture I was living in the Midwest. Yeah, so that one is a biggie for me. On the musical sides of things, or acting or anything, I think that I've had so many failed auditions, like acting auditions that you don't get. I actually keep track of them. I have a spreadsheet, kind of a spreadsheet geek. I keep a spreadsheet that like color codes all of my acting submissions, and I have way more reds than even yellows, and definitely greens. And I love that, because to me, it's just proof that it's a numbers game,
Yes.
but whether it's auditioning for a band that, ultimately doesn't end up becoming a gig that I get, or an acting audition, man, I would say 75% of those times, something else actually comes of it. Like I meet somebody on that audition. Like I think I've barely done a band audition that hasn't somehow introduced me to someone who I ended up doing some work with outside of that. It's just like, there are a lot of great players show up, audition for this gig. Only one person gets it. It doesn't mean you suck. It means for whatever reason, you're not the right person for that scenario. Yeah, those have almost always opened up doors to other things. I mean, I've had that happen with acting auditions. Not gotten an audition, and then had a producer touch base with me months and months before and say, hey, I'm coming back into town. You'd be perfect for this thing I'm doing. And I mean, that is just something that you can never quantify or, like bank on. But again, having that positive attitude and just going, oh, well, like this is good. Chalk it up to good experience. It's good auditioning experience. Just keep going and doing it. It's that the failures are great. I love it.
Well, that's another version as well of being committed to the process and putting the focus on the process rather than that like expected outcome.
Yeah.
Because you might find something else. Like the point for you is to go on the audition and see what happens. I've been having some of that recently where, yeah, I'm just excited to be connecting with new people and to be expanding my network and just meeting other people that are like-minded and doing similar work, whether we work together on this project or something else.
I say that I'm always throwing shit at the wall to see what's going to stick.
Right.
Far less sticks than people realize. People kind of look at what you're doing and like, wow, you're doing all these things. This is a success and this worked and whatever. What they don't see is all the stuff that's sitting on the floor that didn't stick.
Right.
I see it, but at the same time, I don't dwell on that for like a second. I mean, that just doesn't matter to me. Like I just have to keep throwing, keep creating. I try to create more than consume, although I, get stuck consuming and doom scrolling just like anybody once in a while.
It's a great phrase, create more than consume.
Yeah, it's definitely always a work in progress, but it's a life goal, I think, of mine to try to be creating more than I consume. I think that just constantly creating and throwing stuff out there and not stressing so much about what people think about it is really important. And what is important is that it's something that is authentically you, that you want to be creating or talking about or whatever. And you just reiterated that about you can control that, but not the outcome. Like with books or anything, you just never know which one's going to stick. And it's said that the best marketing for a book is the next book. And it's true, because you never know how or where somebody's going to come into your, for lack of better terms, like funnel, like into your little book sphere or whatever. And I have released things and absolute duds. Again, I don't think people even notice. And then I've released some things that completely surprising to me were hits that have just rocked. And there's no way, there are things I can try to do to manufacture that. And there are things you learn that can maybe make you a little sharper and kind of optimize your approach and maybe guarantee a little bit of initial success. But you really don't have ultimate control over what people are going to think, or the second that your little post hits the algorithms and how that is either like buried or boosted. I mean, there are things you can try to do and sometimes it works, but more often than not, I feel the best bet, just keep throwing that shit out there. And, you know, you're going to have some surprises once in a while. And that's great.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you share one of those that was a surprise to you that kind of took off more than you were thinking it would?
Yeah. I mean, have written, co-written, you know, and published a number of different drumming instructional books. And the first of my Slam and Simon books, which is just this little cartoon character kid and his pet turtle, who my wife, we were just dating at the time, she had drawn him for the cover. And it's just this little kid speaking pretty casual language to other kids, teaching them how to play some of their basic rock beats. I mean, I think we're closing in on 25,000 copies that's sold. And that thing is just great. Month in, month out, knock on wood. Yeah, you know, you can put books out and get a little bit of, you know, a blast and some attention and sales right off the bat. And then it kind of trickles off. That's extremely common, especially with self-published books. I mean, that's happened with even most of my traditionally published books with different publishing companies. And then once in a while, something like that happens. I'm like, wow, that's crazy. And I have traditional publishing companies reaching out going, we notice on a regular basis that your book's in the top 10. Like, we'd love to chat with you about, you know, taking it on. And I'm like, nope, no interest. Sorry, man.
Mm-hmm.
Because at this point I have 100% control and I make a far greater percentage on it than I ever would with any traditional deal. So yeah, that's, you know, just one example, but
yeah, that's great.
You know, musically it's like that. I mean, with people that I record with, I mean, you record and you record and record, and all of a sudden something hits and it's played in Starbucks all the time. And then you record, and something gets picked up for a Olive Garden commercial, you know, and you get royalties on it. And like, you know, these things just happen. And I, in none of those situations did I ever expect that was going to be the case. Just total surprises.
Yeah. Do you have several or a handful of those that are out that are bringing royalties still?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, in most of those situations, I'm not the lead artist working with people on things, but sometimes there's some publishing points that are associated with them in some of the scenarios. And to me, doing what I do, a lot of my game business-wise is just increasing my personal portfolio of passive income streams. And, you know, I don't talk about it a whole lot online, but when I'm sitting here in the office doing creative work, more often than not, directly or indirectly, that's what I'm working on. Because, you know, whether it's the Simon book or sample packs, you know, audio drum sample packs that I've released either on my own or in collaboration with a handful of different people, other book sales, some recording stuff, loops and things. I mean, all of these to me are things that are out there generating a little income. Again, some more than others, but even the duds that are just trickling in an income, once you have enough of those very small trickles, you know, happening, it amounts to something. And some of them are phenomenal and, you know, can like drastically change your income over the course of a year, like is the case with the Slam and Simon book. Others are something that once a year you get a royalty check from a company for, and you're like, wow, that's not anything to write home about, but that's some really cool extra pocket money that I didn't expect to have this month. So for me, as a creative artist with the ability to be writing and publishing and recording, that's part of my plan all the time is, what else, who else can I be collaborating with? What other things can I create that will sit out there that generate income? And a lot of those things, like with the algorithms and such out there, a lot of things just need legs. They need to exist for a while, and people can get really frustrated because they put something out and it doesn't generate much right away. But again, the best marketing for a book is the next book. You kind of keep things going out there.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes people find that second one, then they come back and buy the first one, or they hit you up and they're like, hey, dude, can I hire you to do this for my book? And so, yeah, I, kind of behind the scenes, I do a fair amount of editing and some book layout stuff and things. And it's something I don't hang a sign out there saying that I do because I really don't want to do it as a quote unquote job. I really love helping other musician friends create things like that and using my know-how to help drummer buddies and such put their books and their ideas out there. But yeah, it's all just kind of a matter of constantly throwing out there and then gradually accumulating more and more of that.
Yeah, I relate to that 100%. That's the same way that I'm going about things. But I do struggle also when I hear people say, well, you should really only do one thing. And if you focus on just one thing, then you can do a lot better at it. And I have a hard time with that because I also want to be a multiple streams of income person, having other things out there that can be making money at any time, bringing that closer to me. How do you view that?
Man, I would go berserk if I did any one thing. I mean, it's, and that is something that, like, I'm with you 100%. I mean, I have some great friends who are just absolute specialists, even just in the music world, saying, like, I will only play percussion if I firmly have two sticks in my hand. Like, don't want to hit a frame drum with my bare hand, just not my bag, zero interest, super specialized, maybe in specific genres. And that's great. Like, I 100% respect it. All the time I see players like that, and I'm like, damn, I wish I could play like that, because they've just went so far down that rabbit hole and mastered it. And I love it. I respect it. It is not me. And, it used to be something that I feel I struggled a lot more back and forth with that. It was like, oh, should I do that? Or should I, like, why am I doing these other three things? Like, if I didn't do that, like you said, I could, succeed, excel a little bit more in this area, but there's no guarantee of that. I mean, I know some of those specialists who are absolutely killing it professionally and, for lack of a better term, succeeding. And I know some of them who struggle, and, success is whatever we define it for as ourselves. So I can't say whether they've succeeded or not, but I have stopped struggling with that because I just know that's not me. And actually, I think I'm in a place in life right now where I think I am ready more than ever to just follow whatever whim I happen to have and not really care what somebody thinks that I have to do. And yeah, that idea of being my friend Emily Wapnick, she wrote a great book called How to Be Everything, and she uses the term multi-potentialite.
Like that.
And yeah, it's kind of that Renaissance person, like that a person with just many interests, and it's like, why can't you? And I think to each his or her own. And for me, I mean, that's why I do all of these things we talked about. It's also why I say yes and play gigs to, like, in so many different styles. I mean, I love pretty much all of the music I play, but I think I would get bored playing any one of them all the time.
Yeah.
I love the fact that I get to rock the hell out with Floater and play a huge kit and be triggering electronics and be controlling the video on the giant LED screen behind us and break sticks and have my black eyeliner on and, just like be nuts. And, it's like us versus, the 1,000 people in the crowd. And then the next night be playing a little pub in town with a kick snare and a pair of brushes and just be trying to not let anybody notice that there's a drummer behind this brilliant singer-songwriter, because to me, I want to be able to speak both of those languages. It's like that matters to me. And so, yeah, the fact that I have opportunities to do that, like, I feel extremely fortunate for, and that's not the right path for everybody, but yeah, for me, for sure.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's where that comes in, knowing yourself. And that is how it is for me as well. Totally relate to that and consider myself more of a Renaissance man. And I have to do it that way. like I have tried to do just one thing, and I can do that for a while, but I start sinking mentally, and I need to be doing other things. And yeah, it certainly keeps it exciting to be able
Yeah.
to jump to the next thing. And I like staying in that high vibe, higher frequency of like, I'm excited because I'm doing some new thing.
Yeah. I'm with you.
And how they each can, like we were talking about earlier, they can each inform the other things you're doing. Like as a creative, I'll like to go from doing some writing, and then I get to a spot where I'm getting tired or fatigued from that. So then I'll step over and do some sculpting for a bit. It's all kind of flow state stuff, but then I get recharged from doing this other thing and then hop back over to the writing. I'm like, oh yeah, here's another thing I wanted to talk about, and
Yeah.
jump back over to that.
Yeah, I admire that approach. I feel I'm very much the same. I will allot time to do certain things, like got a weekly newsletter and a Substack that I
Yeah.
do, so a lot of times I have kind of writing Wednesdays. I don't always get it done that day, but normally Wednesdays I sit down, I try to, get that stuff down for the week or sometimes 2 weeks coming up. But I think that sometimes people look at, like you doing that, going from writing to, something more artistic, sculpting and stuff, or the things that I do. It's like, oh, like, how do you jump between all of these things that are so different? I can't show somebody the invisible connecting thread to all of them. But to me, they're really not so different. I mean, they're different enough that they keep my interest. I like bouncing from this thing to that thing, but to me, they're kind of the same in my head, at least in my heart, maybe. And like you said, they inform each other. I mean, that it's like taking the long walk, the value of walking to get the brain working and solve problems and things, which, has been done for ages by so many creative types. And to me, I get that same value from just switching, like I get away from this writing for a bit when I hit this, little wall and take off and go into the studio and work on recording this project, or do some reading, and suddenly in the middle of recording something, this has happened so many times where I've been in the middle of recording somebody's parts and I'm like, I gotta just shut down Pro Tools, go back into the office. I know what I need to say at the end of that newsletter or whatever,
Yeah.
And I think that things inform each other, and it just allows your brain to be working on different levels, which it always is. It's always working on the problems you have. It's just we're not always aware of it.
Right. So what has led you to this? You said just a bit ago that you're at a spot now in your life where you are feeling like you want to follow whatever whim pops up and be doing whatever you want to be doing. What has contributed to that and kind of got you to that spot at this point in life?
Some of it could just be, age, having like spent enough time doing things. And I think for myself, it's just been a long process ever since I was young, trying to get away from kind of this culture I was raised in, expecting you to be a people pleaser. And, you'd kind of alluded to that, it's like the thing, you question like, wow, everybody thinks that I should just do this thing. Like, why wouldn't I do that? Maybe they're right, or maybe you're just doing it to appease them and so that they like you more, or, think that you're making the right decisions in life or whatever. And I think that it's like success in general. I think, when you've had no success, a small win can give you a little bit more confidence to reach out and try something else. And then, you have a little failure, but you have another little win. And then you're like, oh, okay, cool. Maybe that actually is possible. And you keep trying. With enough of them, you get to this point where you can just trust that, yeah, I'm going to have some failures, but success is there. Like, I've just got to, keep throwing myself out there. And similarly, I think for me, as I, have ventured into different things and, had people, whether it's friends or just people online or family, question some of the things I've done. And in the end, the outcome is fine, or at least just desirable to me. With enough of that happening over the years, I think I've gotten to a point where I'm like, I just don't want to listen to that noise anymore. I trust myself more now. And I trust myself, and I trust the universe. I trust the process. And it's like, I just feel way healthier and happier if I just do whatever the hell I want to do. So
yeah,
that is a biggie. But also I last year I had an interesting little health situation arise where I've typically been pretty fit, do a fair amount of like bouldering, and I'm pretty active and such, but likely due to a chiropractic neck adjustment, I had an occipital lobe stroke. And crazy, super unexpected. I mean, I'm feeling much better now. They said while I was in the hospital that I was young and healthy, and so I was going to recover quickly, which has been the case. It's been great. I have to say, I'm not going to complain about it. I mean, even when it happened, my wife and I were just like, huh, really? We weren't freaked out about it. I mean, did I have a little emotional roller coaster a little while in the weeks afterwards? Yeah, for sure. But we were just like, wow, like, okay, well, what does that mean? Like, what do we have to, do to move forward? And we just kind of made the decision to do it and not freak out about it. I mean, it's weird to even say that I had that. Like, it just seems like such a weird thing to even talk about sometimes. But yeah, like I said, it ended up being caused by something that I thought I was doing for my health.
To take care of you. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right,
I come
right.
back, like from flying on planes and, like hauling drum gear and stuff, and I've twisted out. I go and kind of get cracked back into shape. So watch the neck adjustments, kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
Avoid those. But yeah, I think that for sure, I mean, has to contribute. I mean, it's something where, first of all, I feel extremely fortunate. It could have been far worse. I had a temporary loss of a third of my vision, but it came back. I had no other deficits. Like I said, I'm doing great. I cannot even begin to say that it was horrendous because I know people who've had far worse come of similar situations. So I'm not going to pretend like, oh, woe is me. But
so that's where the symptoms came from. It was vision was what you were experiencing when you realized like something was happening.
Yeah. So really crazy thing. I mean, I had this adjustment, and then it was shortly thereafter followed up by a super intense gym session that I like went to failure and maybe a little beyond on all the exercises. So could be this combination of the neck adjustment and some neck tension and things. But starting after the chiropractic adjustment, I had some pain in my neck, which I'll experience from time to time when they just didn't quite get something, so I didn't raise any concerns. But over the course of the next week, that pain gradually crept up my neck and like over my scalp, and it got pretty intense. And so I went to the doctor, and they said, this is very unusual, later in life, but welcome to migraines, my friend. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. I got migraines. I was prescribed a medication. This was on like a Friday. I was able to pick up the meds the next Tuesday. Didn't even get to take one yet because I picked up the meds and promptly took my dog to the dog park and was throwing a ball and happened to look up in the sky through the ball. And I thought that I saw like a sunspot that kind of stuck with me for a second or something, as it does when you look at the sun or a lamp or something. And then quickly realized that no, actually, with both eyes, the entire left third of my vision was frosted glass. It was just, and it was like this live jiggling semi-transparent frosted glass. It was very weird. If I closed my eyes, that same area was very Daft Punk, like techno colory, just like crazy. Had a terrifying drive home. And I was like, man, these migraines are freaking weird. Like, this stuff is crazy. Like, these things don't mess around. I taught my private lessons online. My wife comes home. I tell her about how weird these migraine symptoms have gotten. And she's like, no, I don't like that. Like, she sat with me as we jumped on for a video call with the doc, and he's like, I want you to just go in and get a CT scan. And I was not aware of this, but he specifically sent us to a hospital that has a really strong stroke unit, because he already had his suspicions. And did the CT scan, did an MRI the next day, and saw the picture. I'm like, holy crap, like that's insane. And like I said, it was occipital lobe. So what happened was the chiropractic neck adjustment had caused an internal dissection on the inside of the carotid artery on my right side. And so basically the inside of the artery was peeled away a bit. Blood had clotted up against it. And at the moment that I threw that ball with the dog, that shot off and hit the brain in the occipital lobe. And again, super fortunate. That could have gone a lot of worse places, like more, worse could have happened. So I can't complain. But yeah, I mean, I'm doing great, but at the same time, I'm playing a lot of shows right now. I'm in a place where I mostly pretend like it didn't happen, and if I'm overdoing it, my body lets me know, but I've gotten better and better. But that something like that can't not make you think differently about life, And so, yeah, I'm not taking life or music making for granted at all. I mean, I'm just loving playing shows with people and, going back to the question, like, screw what anybody thinks. Like, I'm going to do whatever the hell I want to do.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm glad you're doing well and recovered from that. In fact, I mean, from a distance over here where I am, I was like, well, it seems like he got shot out of a cannon after that and has just been producing things left and right. And it's evident that you're doing what you want to be doing.
Well, I appreciate that. And that, yeah, after a little stretch of time, not getting to do a lot of the things that I wanted to do after that during the recovery phase, I was definitely ready at the top of this year once I got to a place where I felt up for it.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of as you said, like I felt ready to shoot myself out of a cannon and just go, you know what? Like, I am just going to finish some shit. I'm going to get some stuff done.
Yeah. And so speaking of that, then you have your recent book out now that you've written. That's kind of different from your other writing. Can you tell me some about that?
Yeah. This recent book is called The Bayfielders Ghost Hunt. One of the small Midwest towns I grew up in was Bayfield, Wisconsin, up on Lake Superior. It is, like, right now, I think the town population is probably 600 or something, really tiny little town. And I've just kind of always wanted to not only share some silly little stories from growing up there as a kid, but also try my hand at writing kind of some middle grade chapter book fiction. So this was my first go at that. And it's a short little story about a couple of besties going on a little ghost hunt in the town of Bayfield. And there are elements of it that are fiction and there are elements of it that are 100% true. And I kind of leave that to the readers to try to guess which are which. But it has been a lot of fun putting it out. With anything new like that, there always comes that imposter syndrome. I'm like, what am I doing? And I've had so many people go, well, what's the drum angle on this? I mean, like, it has to be music related, right? And because that's what they expect of you.
Sure.
I'm like, no, it's just a little kid story, but it's great. Yeah. By the time this episode airs, like, I will have been back in the Midwest doing some book promo stuff. I'm headed back there very soon to hit a little lifestyle show on one of the TV stations and do visits at a couple of different libraries in a few towns in the area. And yeah, it's been a lot of fun exploring yet again, a completely different angle.
Yeah, that sounds so cool and fun. That, like, when I saw it, I was like, I just find that inspiring. I was like, this is so great. I don't know if you're hearing that often, but even from afar, it's inspiring just to see somebody doing their thing out there, another creative person. And something I was like, oh, that is so cool. It was unexpected for me. And it's just like somebody living it and doing it and looks like you're having a good time.
Yeah, it is really a lot of fun. There was that moment when it got public. Actually, the moment that terror struck for me was the moment that the first person commented saying, just ordered it, online. Maybe again, the first time somebody posted a picture holding it. And I'm like, crap, people are actually reading this. Like, oh, no, it's scary.
It's out there, bro.
Yeah. But now I'm just really enjoying it, kind of relishing in it. And it's one of my favorite experiences of that so far has been, I've got a stack of them sitting right here next to me, but a couple of weeks ago, I got to open up a couple copies of the book and personalize them and ship them off to the 3 classmates and friends who characters in the book are based off of.
Yeah.
And, initials are the same, the names are changed, but I got to kind of write and go like, hey, thanks for coming along on this adventure with me and inspiring this character, and really looking forward to meeting up with nearly all, if not all of them on this trip coming up. And yeah, it's just, for me, it's been a fun adventure, kind of revisiting my childhood and running through the streets of town and all the little shenanigans that very honestly did happen when I was back there as a kid, and just kind of sensationalizing it a little bit and putting the story out there.
Yeah, that sounds like you're going to have fun on that trip too.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Well, awesome, Mark. This has been really, really a great conversation. I feel like I could just keep talking for.
Oh, I know, man. There's so many. We line on so many different ways with some of our views, the ways we look at the world. It's great.
Yeah. Where can people that want to find out more about what you're up to, where can they connect with you on social or however?
Best place on the socials is probably Instagram, and it's just at my name. So it's just at Mark Powers. And otherwise, my two websites that you might check out would be powerspercussion.com. It's largely music related things. And then also markdangerpowers.com. So my full name. And that is where I am sharing my weekly newsletter. I do a weekly series that is essentially mindset for musicians. So looking at mental models and things along those lines. And either of those spots, drop a line, say hey.
Yeah, I've been enjoying it. Not a musician yet myself, but I've been enjoying your writing there.
Thanks for reading.
Yeah. And this is your full legal name, Mark Danger Powers.
It actually is. TSA loves it.
Yeah, that's got to make for a good time traveling.
So often. It's great.
Well, thanks so much, Mark, for being on the podcast, and look forward to seeing what you're up to in the future.
Levi, thanks for having me, man. You are the best. I really appreciate the invite.
Thanks. All right.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to hear more or check out the show notes, head over to smithandsavage.com and sign up for the Hey Buddy newsletter for updates on future episodes. You can also follow along on Instagram at smithandsavage. Until next time, this is your host, Levi Pollard, reminding you to be civilized, stay wild.